5 hosts, 4 divisions, all battling it out for the Holy Grail of the American Hockey League, the Calder Cup. This is the Holy Grail Podcast. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Paul, Zack Power, Andrew Rinaldi, Corey Swartz, and Dina Weinheimer.
And welcome to episode number 50 of Field Pass Hockey's AHL podcast, The Holy Grail. Now, if you're looking for Monty Python references, you're not exactly going to find them here, but you will find the golden anniversary of this episode. Today is January 19th, and we're here to give you a recap of the last week in AHL hockey. I'm going to take it around the board, and we'll start in alphabetical order, but it's episode 50, guys, and I want to know what's kind of been your favorite moment, maybe your favorite guest that you've had so far on the podcast.
Oh, man. Andrew Rinaldi from the Grand Rapids Griffins and Chicago Wolves beat, and kind of riding on that horse. It's hard for me to top the Jonathan Berggren and Andrew Podorowski episodes. They're both just full of personality and just a lot of fun, and are probably two of the biggest names that we've had on here. And it was a great opportunity to just sit and chat a little bit of hockey with them. So as far as like guest centric episodes, that's the one. I forget exactly. I think it was episode 3, the first one where you lit yourself on fire. That is, like, for our crew, probably my favorite.
And I'm Corey Swartz. I'm a little bit newer to this. I haven't been on for all 50 episodes, of course, but I would probably say it's a toss-up for me. I would give it to some of the pre-interviews that we did before the Calder Cup Finals this past summer. It was pretty exciting being kind of in the midst of getting to talk to two players from each side. Little did I know future Hershey Bear Sam Annis would be one of them that we get to talk to there, if I remember correctly. And between that, I mean, obviously I'm a little bit biased too. I'd also go with when we had Zach Fish on here. I think he's a great guy. We've been fortunate enough to have him calling for the Bears here for a long time. So it's cool to have, someone that I've kind of gotten to know pretty well over the years on the show. And he's a guy that, always has something really interesting that he says there too. You always learn something when you listen to him, at least for me. So those are two great moments for me.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I'm a little biased when I say that one of my favorite moments was burning myself or almost burning down my apartment twice. That in between the mattress comment and as well the Olympics episode that we did where we talked to a couple of Olympians. It's not often you can say that. And at the time, we did have a host who went over there as well, who kind of brought back some insider information. So that was definitely a little cool. And it's been a fun 50 episodes, and we look forward to being on here for at least another 50, 150. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But there isn't any breaking news this week, but we will get into our elite prospect of the week. And if you haven't really been here for the early portions of January, it's many thanks to our partner, Elite Prospects, the world's leading hockey resources for league, team, and player data. You can check them out, eliteprospects.com. Each week we'll be awarding the AHL Elite Prospect of the Week here on the Holy Grail. And whether it's some kind of on-ice play, maybe it's a personal achievement, and just whatever made them stand out for that week, and they'll be our top AHL prospect of the week. This week's prospect goes to Jonathan Gruden, who scored 5 goals for the past 3 games, also registering an assist against Hershey this past weekend. It's a part of a season that he's had 5 goals and let's start again. He's had 11 goals and 5 assists through 30 games, and a call-up to the NHL. So good on him. The Rochester Mills native was selected 95th overall in the 2018 NHL entry draft by the Ottawa Senators. And of course, all of this data is courtesy of our friends at Elite Prospects. We got a couple news things to get into before we get too far into the episode, and I'll let the guys take over.
For sure. And, to start off is a bit of a tough subject, but the AHL is eagerly awaiting an update at this hour on a situation where Jack Rathbone was transported to a hospital in San Jose following a collision this past weekend. I saw the highlight rolling through Twitter. It was a pretty scary play. There was it was just a real fast bang bang thing. A little bit of head contact, a lot of bit of head contact actually, and there's been some good promising reports on him, but the Canucks staff, they're going to continue to assess the situation. And this is the second time on this podcast that we've had to review a really tough head injury with this promising young defender. It's kind of it's unfortunate for him. We all hope the best for Jack and his family and his team. To hopefully he'll end up kind of bouncing back like he did last time and coming out just fine and ready to hit the ice again.
Yeah, absolutely. We did have a milestone alert over the weekend on a night filled with milestones and little things there on Chris Bork's jersey retirement night. One of the kind of things that kind of popped up at the end was that Hershey Bears head coach Todd Nelson celebrated his 500th professional win behind the bench with a 6-2 win over the Springfield Thunderbirds. And a great clip that, the Bears posted their social media. They have a, it's in the room kind of, one of the things they kind of hand out. You see a lot of NHL teams do to the person of the game. They have a great big bear head that they give to the person to wear. And they gave it to Todd Nelson on his first reaction was to say, "This thing stinks." And that was kind of the lighthearted portion of it. But it's great. He's already been selected to the All-Star game as a result of the Bears being in first place. So it's just kind of another in a long list of achievements for him here recently, for sure.
And then we talk a lot about the relationship between the AHL and the NHL, but we don't spend a lot of time on this podcast looking with the relationship with the ECHL on the next step below. But we got a little bit of news here coming out of Rockford. The Ice Hogs president and general manager, Mark Bernard, has actually been inducted into the ECHL Hall of Fame. Now, he was a goaltender down in the coast all the way back in 1989. And I don't want to say all the way back because that was just a couple years before I was born. But all the way up until, when was this? 2001, with the last appearance with the Toledo Storm. And, he's got his name in the Ring of Honor now, and there's a little bit of good news coming out of Rockford. After we'll get into it. I got some news on the Ice Hogs coming out for you.
Look forward to that. We're also waiting for makeup dates, which are set to be determined following a game between the Manitoba Moose and Toronto Marlies that was suspended due to a spectator medical emergency inside the Coca-Cola Coliseum. Friday's game was tied at 1-1 after the first period. The incident happened during the first intermission, so we'll be waiting to see what happens in the coming days, weeks, months ahead. And again, we've kind of seen it where situations have just gotten so scary over the past couple of weeks. I know that there was an incident between Charlotte and Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and as well, we all know the Buffalo Bills incident there. So it's been a tough few weeks for the sport of hockey, football, whatever. And we'll have to see what happens going a little forward. Okay, and we'll move things on over now to our swipe left and swipe right segment. And Andrew will kick us off.
For sure. So earlier this week, the AHL made a post about these jerseys that the Rochester Americans wore over the weekend in their salute to military service. And they came out looking really fresh. And they had these really sleek looking jerseys for the occasion. And those are the Admirals ones. There we go. But yeah, I love the look. I love the logo. I really do enjoy this jersey. It's a really nice jersey. Now I know what you're thinking is like, okay, of course it's a nice jersey. That's not really a hot take here. But when I first saw this jersey, and guys back me up, does that not look like the Milwaukee Admirals retro jersey? That one right there. Maybe even a better logo for the Admirals. I mean, you see he's got the anchor as his collar, and Like, look at this thing. It's an absolute carbon copy. It's like they were told, just change up the homework a little bit so it doesn't look so obvious that you copied off of them. And those are cool jerseys see, I almost called them the Admirals. Great jerseys for the Americans. Great theme to the night. Wonderful salute to service and everything. I just felt like I was looking at that's a Milwaukee Admiral. You won't tell me that's not a Milwaukee Admiral right there.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we also talked about this a little bit before as well, but this isn't the first time that we've kind of talked about there being another jersey that looks kind of similar. I know we kind of mentioned like the St. John's Ice Caps also had a similar sort of jersey kind of going on a few years ago in 2016. So it looks completely like a Milwaukee's Admirals jersey. It just doesn't look like it. I'm all for it. I'll swipe right.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an easy yes for me because when I first saw it, I was like, wow, did the Norfolk Admirals come back? Like, it's not exactly the color scheme. It's a little more skewed towards Milwaukee, certainly. But, they had a very similar logo like that years ago that just kind of instantly kind of comes to mind for me. And, again, it's a dead ringer. Like, it could just be an alternate take on that jersey you're seeing on the screen if you're watching on YouTube right now that the Milwaukee Admirals actually wear. Like, it looks like, a redesign, a light redesign type of things. If it wasn't for the colors, I thought it was a Milwaukee Admirals jersey when I saw the tweet, if Rochester hadn't been kind of in the top. So, yeah, I give that an easy swipe right. Very nice jerseys. That's the biggest save of the day for that one, I think. Well, and so for mine, we don't do oofs here anymore. But so this one's kind of an oof, but kind of goes back into something I've argued a lot of times before. So there's a situation here, if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing it happen right here, where Max Willman shoots the puck from his own goal line. And, that's just an oof right there by goaltender Ken Appleby. If you're not seeing it on the screen, me just mentioning those names, you probably have seen it. If I've had to guess, just it was making the rounds here. A very improbable play here. But on the second look here, the thing that kind of got me with this play is that, again, as I mentioned before, it's time for the trapezoid rule to go. Because Ken Appleby's playing that puck right along the goal line. He's trying to get ahead of the red line as to not have it potentially play in that zone. Now, everybody's kind of gotten pretty good at playing around the trapezoid, right? We don't see that rule. I don't remember the last time I've seen that rule called or seen it called or anything like that. It's gotten to the point where goalies stick handle around that zone rather than, really being a threat. But if you remove that, I think the goaltender has a little bit more confidence to play the puck and angle the puck so that, there's no chance. These guys are experts at geometry, whether they know it or not type of thing. If he's given a little bit more leeway to stop that puck and have that, for lack of a better word, extra space behind him that he can play it in, I think that it's time for that rule to go. I'm here for chaos, but not this kind of, that's not fun chaos. I'd rather see him stop it, cock it, and throw it back up the boards, Marty Brodeur style, rather than see something like that happen much more.
I get where you're coming from. I really do. But it's right. The guy you're referring to was the whole reason they put that rule into play, because he got so good at playing the puck. It was like having a third D-man out there. And in this day and age, you're not going to discourage offense in any form. So, is it unfortunate that he's kind of got really his best option is to just kind of like sit there and wait in the net. It was a goofy play. Marty Brodeur had something like that exactly happen, and the trapezoid rule wasn't. And like, that's just an oof. That's just an oof. I don't think that's the trapezoid's fault. It's one of those one in a millions that just, it ended up going the wrong way for him. I like the idea of messing around and maybe saying something like if you're on the power play, maybe the trapezoid doesn't matter. So I don't know, something like that, even though that starts to open up like, okay, now your penalty killers are never getting off the ice, but you take a penalty, you kind of deserve your medicine. I guess this all boils down to I'm swiping left on it. I like it. I like where you're going, but you're not going to convince enough people to say less offense.
Now, conversely, the only other thing that kind of makes me think of with the whole playing the puck for the goaltenders thing is if you wanted to add a part 2 or just a thinker for this one, would it be time for them to remove any restriction on goaltenders playing the puck? Now, we don't see that ever. It's rare that you see a goaltender try to play the puck over the center ice red line even, and that's only if they get caught when they're coming off for, to get an extra skater on type of thing. But I would love to see almost, to further this, any restrictions on the goaltender playing the puck in any zone. Like I get I don't really know why I guess I don't get it, why they don't want to have more goaltender offense. I mean, I think back to Joel Hofer scoring a playoff goal and having that be one of the, coolest moments I think I've ever seen live, watching a hockey game, unfold type of thing. And it's rare enough sort of thing. I mean, you think about, Joel Hofer scored a goal. The Hershey Bears have never had a goaltender score a goal in their 85-year history. So, I mean, it's still pretty rare of a thing to happen just in general. But I'd almost go as far as to say I think all goaltender restriction, rules should be dropped. Because, I mean, logistically, it's not going to happen. But I'm here for the chaos a little bit more of goaltenders getting into it a little bit more. I think it's fun.
Are you okay with opening up contact with the goalie that plays the puck then? Because you're going to invite a lot more of it.
Well, it's going to happen. I think it's an unfortunate byproduct, but again, it kind of goes into the thinking of this is rare enough. The goaltender knows what to do in those situations. Like, it depends on the severity of the contact too. I mean, like you said, it is a slippery slope here, certainly. But, when I say I think of more like more of those things, I think more of just like, touches on the puck. No one's going to try to run. You shouldn't try to run a goalie. Obviously, there's going to be some knucklehead that will, and totally make me look like a fool on this one. But, again, it's a slippery slope. So I see what you're saying there. But I would like to at least see the floor open that if a goalie plays it at center ice, he's not going to get a penalty for, was it Patrick Waugh that did the little dipsy doodle but got a penalty over the center ice line? Like, that shouldn't be a penalty. Those are the kind of ones where you're sort of like, okay, it's a technicality type of thing. So I get why it's there, but yet I don't get that it's there. I'm sorry, Zach, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here. So
I'll say this, you have my vote because I was trying to think back to the reason why they did it. And if there was any kind of safety reason, you wouldn't have had me, right? But I can't, unless they're worried that the goalie's going to get decked in the corner, I can't really see the safety aspect of it being there. We also have to think, now compared to 18 years ago that they were locked out, the game has gotten a lot faster. And how often do you really see goaltenders playing the puck now versus before, right? I do get Corey's initial argument as well, and Andrew made a good point, that it happened before the trapezoid was there. But if he had that extra room to kind of cradle the puck a little more, it might not have happened. Maybe, I don't know. But I think it kind of opens up the power play a lot more. It'll make it a lot faster of a power play as well. You'll definitely see some offense going up on the power play side of things. But you know what? If the goaltender's stubborn enough to go out into the corner and play the puck, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. So I'll swipe right. Yeah, I'm all for it.
I will say I always just get frustrated at pucks dying in the corners. Like, they get a soft clear or whatever, and it goes in the corner and just dies. And, the goalie's looking at it like, looking at his teammates like, sorry, guys, if I could play it, I would. And he can't. And it's one of those things. That's my main reason. It obviously opens the door for more activities like that, as they say. But, that's where it starts. And, I think it'd just be fun because these guys are skilled. I'd love to see a little more skill on it. So, I mean, that's just where it comes from. It comes from a place of love and from a place of, I just don't like restrictive zones like that in hockey, I guess.
Fair. A big restriction for me are the players. My take, I think that all the players should have tablets on the benches of the AHL. I think that it's an advantage that's used in the NHL. And you know what? The best way to prepare for the NHL is by playing almost a carbon copy in the AHL. I get we had the conversation last week about angles and whatnot, and who knows even if the technology is there. But it's 2023. I think we can open things up to having a tablet on the bench for the players.
John Tortorella wants to know your location.
That's what gave me the idea. And I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if there's even an appetite for it. Like, do the coaches even want it? Tortorella didn't like the Michigan either. We still do it.
Right. Tortorella is very angry man yelling at a cloud syndrome. Good coach, but like there's a lot of the game's changed, the game's evolved, and this is how these guys are learning kind of like where they went wrong and what they can do to correct that on their next shift, a lot of it is rinse and repeat, and kind of it to me is like, okay, if you made a mistake, what you did, right? I mean, these guys are pro hockey players. They know what they did. Do they really need to know, like, oh, I made a move with my forehand when I had space in my backhand and I got the puck stick checked off my stick. Like, I need to watch that again in order to see like what I did wrong. No, they know what they did. But I guess it just offers a different perspective to see like, okay, when I'm here and I do this, that guy's open over there. So next time, instead of taking it in the corner, move it up to the high slot or something. I don't know. I'm not an actual hockey player. I play beer leagues on Wednesdays, but I'm trying to understand. I agree, and I'm all about the principle of doing it. Yes. But if they can't get the cameras right now, if Chicago is sticking to Rockford and Milwaukee 36 times a year because they can't afford a road trip out to the west or the east coast, what makes you think that they're going to shell out the kind of dough to put iPads out on the benches? I mean, I would love it. The idea is getting a right swipe. The possible execution of it is still, it's got to take some time. I think this league is still kind of a couple steps behind in a couple areas. And I think if you tell me like within, I'll give you 4 years, I'll be like, yes. But not in 2023, unfortunately.
It brings up a question about camera angles. Before I'll let Corey give his take, I want to play the clip one more time of the goalie goal. And this was the camera angle that everybody's seen for 90% of the game. So you get that wide angle, which is fine, but we actually missed the better part of that goal, right? And so my thing is in order to kind of do something like that, you kind of need to be able to have that angle to say, where did we go wrong on the other side?
Yeah, you got to like baby steps. You got to get the cameras. Otherwise, you look at the iPad and be like, what happened there? And they did bring the different look there, but like one or two different angles is it really going to change all that much than what you see on the ice? I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, my thought is, kind of throws the logistics out the window. It's like, listen, we talked about it before. AHL TV it's getting there. It's better than it has been, but not all the angles are there, right? But my thinking is that if it doesn't come, I'm not saying I swipe right for the idea, because I think that having more video and more things to work with is a good thing, right? Like you can't go wrong with having more angles. John Tortorella is also probably wanting to know my location right now too. But my thinking is, a lot of these teams, I don't know for all of, the AHL teams, but for Hershey, they have a video coach. They have, some people in the position where they can, obviously, Emily Engelnotsky is a great example of, a video coach that started in Hershey, is now up in Washington. They're very detail oriented people that, if the video exists, they're going to find it. And obviously we only see select angles, all that kind of stuff. They sort of have systems in place that if you don't have it in the middle of a game, you're going to have it at some point to break it down with players. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in terms of video that coaches go through that we don't know about and we don't get to see. And, the mind boggles at it in a lot of ways. I would love to spend a day just kind of being a fly on a wall in a, Hershey video session that they have there, I think. But these guys go through it. I mean, they go through it, they find it, they prep it, they clip it. It may not be on the bench, but if it doesn't come around, I mean, that's not going to stop these great, men and women behind the scenes that make this sort of thing happen. So I swipe right for the concept, but in execution, if it takes a few years, as Andrew said, I mean, I don't think that it's going to stop anybody from finding video application around the league, certainly.
Sounds good to me, at least. Speaking of things that are sounding good and maybe not so good, we're going to switch over to our who's not and who's hot session. And we'll be starting things off with Corey.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, I have a couple of great Atlantic Division ones. I got the pleasure of watching a good bit this past weekend, so it's a recency bias, but it's an easy one. For Hershey, it's Mike Sgarbossa. I mean, I don't think this guy, it's an odd thing to me because, I mean, he gets talked about a lot in terms of Hershey, and obviously by extension, that means I talk about him a lot, right? But, across the league, he doesn't crack the top scorers in the league. He's a couple points behind those guys. But this is a guy that, I feel like is, such an X factor in any team he's playing for. And it's such an odd one because, we haven't really heard his name come up 2 tons. But he's a guy that when he's in there and he's playing like almost every game, it seems like, he could play a 3-3 and he gets better as it goes along, as, in contrast to, what you're thinking of type of thing. So he has, 6 points in his last 4 games, only been held off the score sheet 3 times in his last 18 games, 32 points in 32 games, and they're clutch. I mean, you're seeing on the screen, if you're looking on YouTube, he had 2 goals, including the game-tying goal with 24 seconds left in Hershey's game against Wilkes-Barre on Wednesday that, helped to salvage a point out of that game, if nothing else. And, it's just one of those things. I mean, he's obviously has the benefit of playing with 2 great guys in Mike Vecchione and Ethan Frank on a regular basis. But, he's one of the guys where I really say early on, obviously with Hershey, they're so even around that, you could pick any guys, a lot of guys for the All-Star game, but he's an early snub, in my opinion, for the All-Star game, even though he made it last time they had it in 2020. And as for not, I mean, it's got to be the Springfield Thunderbirds for me. I mean, pardon my pun, but, they laid an egg this past weekend. They had a great chance to they had a little bit of momentum coming into the new year. They had started to get some wins. The Atlantic Division, as we're going to find out, we'll talk about a little bit more, is an absolute car wreck, on the highway, nobody's moving type of thing. In terms of teams that could possibly move up and move down from, third place on down pretty much. But, they went from having a little win streak to now having lost 4 games in a row and, allowing 5 or 6 goals in their last 3 games. It's gone from, they even had Matthew Pekka come back, who's missed the entire season with injury. And even though he put up 4 assists in 3 games, 4 assists in 2 games just in the Hershey series, it hasn't been enough. And when you're a team that's, has to play good defensively to make up for, how many guys have currently been taken from them for St. Louis, like, you got to have a good overall game. And, the Springfield Thunderbirds are finding ways to not be in contention, which, I mean, sure, we're at the half season mark and there's a lot of time left, but it just doesn't bode well. Because, I mean, one of these teams, a couple of teams catch fire, they're gone and you're not going to catch them again. And it's kind of, obviously it's been a recurring theme. I've talked about it several times here, but you only get so many chances here. I mean, even if the expanded field, it's not, you can't be running on E in your car gas tank for too long before your car stops, right? So it's one of those things. I'm kind of concerned if I'm them. Obviously, they could turn it around and win 4 straight, and I would look pretty silly after that. Or maybe a profit, I don't know. But, it's one of those things. I just love to see them find consistency where nobody really seems to have right now.
So over in Central, there's a bit of a surprise for the hot. It's Iowa, like really, it's the Iowa Wild. But I mean, hey, when you're hot, you're hot, and there's no denying it. You know, the Wild, they've won 5 straight games now, and they've gone from playoff bubble to really middle of the road in that division. So just kind of. Corey, you touched on it earlier. Once you kind of get on a little bit of a heater, you start to get running. These standings can shake up really quick once a team gets on a roll. And as for it's going to sound like I'm picking on David Gus a little bit here, but I'm just going to go with the whole Rockford offense. Yeah, I know I said it last week, but when you're putting up the kind of numbers that they were earlier in the season, it tends to get noticed when you're not. It's likely coinciding with the call-ups of Lucas Reichel and Brett Seney, but, Gus has just managed 1 assist in his last 4 games. Again, coinciding with that, Rockford's been 1-2-1 with just 5 goals for in those 4 games. So, it kind of happens when you lean heavily on one offensive line. When you lose 2 of those 3 guys, it can be tough. You need everyone else to kind of stand up, and they haven't really with the Ice Hogs. So Gus has kind of fallen down to 9th in the scoring race now, recently passed up by his former teammate in Chicago, Andrew Podorowski.
Interesting. For me, my hot, and I want to take a look at the North Division, and that's got to be Emil Benstrom. I mean, he has points in 12 straight games going back to November 5th. And during that time, he's had 10 points and scored a goal in each of his games going back even to December 3rd, which is good for 9 goals through 8 games. It's been a part of a Cleveland team that has been notably struggling, and we'll talk about that in a little moment, but, they're getting some help back. Looking at my not, it's got to be Tucson. And you know what? Tucson was a team that I talked about a little bit earlier in the season as being able to stay competitive. And while they're in the middle of the pack of the division, I mean, they've got ignored for far too long. They've won 1 out of their last 9 games. The last time they won in regulation with more than 1 goal, you had to go back to like December 17th. In this little stretch that they've had, they've let up 46 goals through those last 9 games, and they have a goals against average rather of over 5.0. So I'm looking to them. Things got to change, and that's through their starter and their backup. So it's not just a one-man show for them. And for me, that's got to be my not, and things have got to change for them. We're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to move into the race for the Holy Grail. Corey is covering the Atlantic Division, and he will get us going.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of referred to it a little bit here, and I think the best way to describe this is just traffic jam. Traffic jam is here, and there's no crews coming in sight. It's going to be up for one of these cars to free themselves here and get going a little bit here. But 2 teams that are free in that, pile up here are Hershey and Providence, who are kind of neck and neck for the top spot here. They finally even out in terms of games played at 37. Hershey has a 3-point lead for first place. Those 2 big games to cap off their homestand were huge for them to get those 2 wins. Providence has done a good job of hanging around in that race and really making it competitive. Not too many head-to-heads with those 2 teams, at least in the near future here. A little bit down the road, it'll get interesting. But the Charlotte Checkers kind of have pushed up for a couple of points into to third place. I'm sorry. Wilkes-Barre's right on their heels, but sitting pretty. They're 1 point behind, but have 3 games in hand on Charlotte, as Wilkes-Barre just hasn't really kind of caught up from their one, week of, time off, as well as, they have 1 makeup game they're going to be playing a chunk of, I think, next week. Bridgeport's in 5th. They've had a couple of wins after, losing 11 games in a row, I believe the record was. Hartford and Lehigh Valley are kind of tied at 6th and 7th. I think Lehigh Valley has a tiebreaker currently on them as we speak right now. That'll, change, of course, by the time this podcast drops, potentially, with, them in action on Wednesday. And the Thunderbirds are in dead last. And, Springfield and Bridgeport actually met up for a game just yesterday. So on Monday, on Martin Luther King Day. and lost to Bridgeport by a 6-2 score. If they had won that game, we'd be looking at 4 teams tied at 37 points in the bottom of the Atlantic Division. So, you really want to talk about car pileup. That would have been poetic, but of course, it didn't work out quite that way for me to be able to have a good poetic story to be able to tell you guys. But it's still pile up. Third place and last place are separated by 7 points. So one team's a slump, as Bridgeport showed us, and one team is a heater away from turning things around here as the second half dawns.
Yeah, and looking at the North Division, I mean, there's ain't no mountain that's high enough. The Toronto Marlies continue to remain near the top of the league this week, or the division this week, rather, with wins in the past 5 straight. And 9 of their last 10 have all been wins. I believe that's excluding the game that would have been last Friday against Manitoba. They're 6 points ahead of Utica, who them and third place Rochester have won 7 of their last 10 games respectively, which is looking pretty good for them. Both Syracuse and Belleville make up the middle, and Laval's in 6th, with Cleveland in last with losses in 7 of their last 10 games. I mean, the bright side is Dylan Simpson is back. Benstrom just seems to be on an absolute heater for December and into January. So they're looking to get things back, but Columbus is definitely riddled with the injury bug, and we'll see how things go a little bit later in the month.
As we move on over to the Central, at the top, it's the Texas Stars, as same as it ever was, and they're riding a 3-game win streak to the top. Not like they needed the extra juice and points or anything, but it certainly helps. And currently, they have a 6-point lead over both Milwaukee and Rockford for the crown. Those 2 teams are tied there with 44. Iowa's 5-game win streak, that kind of puts them right behind them in the 4th place in the division, while Manitoba with 39 points kind of rounds out your playoff teams. And I think it just kind of goes without saying at this point, Grand Rapids and Chicago at the bottom. I'm gonna rescind my swipe from last week. There's no way I'm covering. If you've seen these teams, there's no way I'm covering playoff hockey this year. Oh.
If you're on YouTube, I have a cheeky little smile because Andrew last week was pumping my tires about how good they're going to be. And I said, no, they're not. And he's like, oh, they are.
Positive vibes, Zach. I wanted positive vibes. I was like, if I can will one of these teams in with my aura of positivity.
I guess it doesn't help either that Iowa got good either.
Why Iowa's on a 5-game win streak? They played Grand Rapids 3 times in a row, and they won all 3 of them.
When it rains, it pours. At least they got a change in guard and goal, I guess. That would be the way to look at it. Is it really better? We'll be the judge. It's lonely at the bottom, but it certainly isn't lonely at the top. And the Pacific Division has Coachella Valley holding with a 5-point lead ahead of anybody else, and they have points in their last 10 games. This team is just – I don't know what to say anymore about these guys. They just continue to roll. Calgary and Abbotsford still keeping pretty dominant with spots 2 and 3. Colorado is just trying to get back on the horse. They just can't seem to get anything tangible going again. But they're just a point behind Abbotsford. So if that means anything, it's been pretty close in that 3rd, 4th position. Looking down the middle, we got Ontario. We've talked about them before. They're still just trying to rally again. Tucson, who's 2-8 through their past 10 games. San Jose, Henderson, Bakersfield, all just trying to get back on the horse. And San Diego, who, as much as I dump on them, they're 5-5 through their past 10. So I guess it's you win some and you lose some for them. And we'll see what happens going with that forward. Speaking of looking forward, we're going to move to our game of the week, and we'll get Corey to start us off in the Atlantic Division.
Yeah, so that was a great transition, by the way. I usually pick on Atlantic Division teams to play for, and obviously I love to go and just be like, oh, the Bears games up in Canada are going to be very fascinating to watch, and I'm sure they will be. But I found one that actually piqued my interest a little bit more this weekend, as the Hartford Wolfpack and the Providence Bruins are matching up twice this weekend. I'm picking the Sunday matchup um, as the one to watch out for. Because if you're looking at it from a Providence Bruins perspective, the Bruins play 5 straight games against the Hartford Wolfpack. They played 2 this past weekend. They play 2 this coming weekend, and then they play 1 next weekend. And obviously, if you're looking at it from Hartford's perspective, they have a couple other matchups and teams sprinkled in there. But that's a playoff series right there. They split the first 2 games this past weekend, and it seems like it's a rivalry where anybody can really kind of come out and steal a couple of points, right? For Hartford, they desperately need it to get out of the basement, and Providence still wants to kind of get back at the top of the league here. So it's valuable points for both teams in their own respective situations here. And Hartford really proved, I think, last weekend that they can hang around with these guys, and they're a team that, for all their struggles and the fact they even lost Ryan Carpenter before, I believe it was the second game at the very least, they could play well enough on a given day to hang around with these guys and, be a threat to anybody. Obviously, you really would like to be in the top 2 spots if you can. So, I think Hartford's kind of one of those underdog teams that could really stun somebody like we saw in a couple of different situations last year. So kind of excited to see how those ones play out and see who really gets the better of them for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to just pick one game here because I think we got a really big series. Friday and Saturday night, Milwaukee is going into the cornfields to take on the Iowa Wild. And can you just imagine the ludicrousness of it all if the Wild can ride into this on a 7-game heater and end up second in the division by the weekend's end? That's the kind of chaos that I'm here for. And honestly, I think it speaks volumes to how big of a matchup this is here. This is Iowa's chance to prove that they can do more than just beat up on an anemic Rockford offense and a putrid Grand Rapids team, and instead show to us that they're legit contenders in this division. They got Sammy Walker and Jesper Wallstedt heading to Laval as all-stars. Those are going to be the biggest names for them. They're going to be in front of their hometown fans against a big division rival. This is going to be amped up electric hockey. I might just skip over my beats and watch that game. I don't know about you guys.
And 2 teams that have been skipping beats, and that's Bakersfield and Tucson, and they're both
killing it with the transitions tonight.
But you know what? For me, I look at this game, and I'll look at Friday, because there's a reason why I'm going to be watching this game, is because 2 teams have to win this. Right? These are 2 teams that can't and just can't win games right now. Bakersfield, they've had their own struggles. The last 10 games, 3-5-1, and overall they're 12-19, 2-1. I'm throwing numbers at you, but Tucson, they're not doing much better either, and they've lost 8 of their last 10. So when I look at that, I'm looking at 2 teams that gotta win. Right? They have to do something. And if Tucson wants to stay competitive in the Pacific Division and keep up there with the ranks of Colorado, Ontario, and Abbotsford, which they're keeping relatively close with, they got to do it now. And they got to win some games against people in the below them, in the bottom of the division, Bakersfield 9th and Tucson 6th. So you know what? That's who I'm looking at, and we'll have to see what happens on that front.
I know I said it before, but it's so interesting seeing that chasm in the Pacific Division where it's like you have legit contender, legit contender, legit contender, legit contender. Ontario might be surprisingly legit. And then it's like an Acme anvil just takes you down to the quality of a Tucson, and then followed up with San Jose, Henderson, Bakersfield. And you'd figure with so many teams, you'd be running into some more of these guys, and maybe they'd get a little more middle of the road. But I guess when they go up against some more of these powerhouses, I mean, Coachella is just a team on a mission right now, and that train stops for nobody. Certainly not a team like San Jose or Henderson. So it's fascinating to see because, you know, like I said, one winning streak can do wonders for your season. Look at Iowa, but I feel like Bakersfield could win about 15 in a row and they might still not be in a playoff position.
And you know what, Andrew? It really has been a fever dream. Like, and it's almost like the all offense just dies. Like, the Atlantic Division has been a pileup, and I'll be the first to admit that. But like, I look at the bottom half of the Pacific Division, and I just think, like, what more can you do? Right? Like, San Diego will go out to Milwaukee and then they'll prove that they can actually win a hockey game. But then they'll come home and they'll lose 14 out of 18 times. Right? Like, that's a scary stat to me. When you start to see winning percentages below 30%, that's quite scary to me. And you know what? With their 29.7% winning percentage, they have no chance of catching up to Coachella Valley, who literally has more than double the points of them right now. San Diego is 22 points. Coachella Valley is 54. It's, you know what? A lot of the Pacific Division, like most divisions, you're playing the same teams over and over. And I just don't know if it's the schedule where it's just Calgary playing the bottom four or Coachella Valley just always playing the bottom four. But you can never seem to find a week where it's not Abbotsford, Colorado, Calgary, or Coachella Valley. And I wonder how they're going to stack up against the rest of the league, especially come playoff time. We last year, you know, we all remember that it was Stockton, it was Ontario. They were the 1 and 2, and then out of nowhere, it was Colorado. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see something similar to that in the playoffs, where you just have two ultra heavyweights going against each other. Because I mean, looking at the playoff format now, is it 2 and 8?
It's 2 and.
So, like, what teams get in?
I thought it was 2 and 7.
Okay.
And it was last year, but you're right. They added Coachella. Here's your scary thought of the night, because I was just looking at just how terrible San Diego was. And it occurred to me that San Diego might have one of the, if not the best young goaltending prospect down there in Lucas Dostal, and they're just so putridly bad. Their point percentage is under 300, and I'm looking at Lucas, and I was like, oh well, Dostal must like really be struggling. And then I guess in the win column, but he's got a 924 save percentage on a team that gives up 140 goals. I feel like they're gonna burn this young kid out, man.
He's good. Okay, so the playoffs will include the top 6 finishers in the 8-team Atlantic Division. So 6 out of 8 for the Atlantic. It'll be 5 out of 7 for the North and the Central, and it'll be 7 of 10 in the Pacific Division. The first round matchups will be a best of 3 series, as they've been for quite some time. And the 2 highest seeds in the Atlantic and the 3 highest seeds in the North and Central, and the first place team in the Pacific will all have byes into the next round in the best of 5 semifinals. And so right now, if the playoffs started today, it would be Coachella Valley getting the bye. And then it would be Calgary versus San Jose. San Jose has lost 7 of their last 10 games. They just hasn't been a season for them. It would be Abbotsford and Tucson, and Colorado and Ontario, which would be a pretty close matchup.
That'd be serious.
So that would be the Pacific Division. if you were looking at it that way. I guess while we're on the topic, we may as well look at the Atlantic Division. Hey, so it'd be 6 of 8. So it'd be Hershey and Lehigh Valley, which would be a thriller, I guess. Providence and Bridgeport, and Charlotte and Wilkes-Barre, which I would be fascinated to see, and I'm sure Corey would as well.
And you're talking the first round series. It's not team. I thought the way last year worked, it was teams 1 and 2 got a bye, and then it was
God, they did
4 and 8 and 5 and 6.
Yeah, so you're right. Okay, so
yeah. Sorry, I'm forgetting how to numbers.
I mean,
Or no,
it's not really your fault. It was an absolute mutant of a playoff bracket, and they're bringing it back. And I understand why they're bringing it back because, I think at the end of the day, every NHL franchise wants their team, their prospects to get that playoff hockey feeling, even if it's just for a couple of games, unless you're Grand Rapids. But this entire bracket system was just I'm glad for the Central because they had like one little play-in series between 4 and 5, and then it was like normal, right? But everything else was just throwing caution to the wind. Let's just drop a stick of dynamite in there and let's see what happens.
So can I ask you this? If we can't find a clear way to settle out these playoffs, because you have some teams with 10 teams in a division, right? Why don't they just go back to the 1 versus 8, right, in the conference? So the playoff matches in the Eastern would be Hershey and Bridgeport, Providence and Rochester, Wilkes-Barre and Toronto, and Utica and Charlotte in the East. Then in the West, it would be Coachella Valley and Iowa, Texas and Rockford, Milwaukee and Calgary, and Abbotsford and Colorado.
The big issue they did away with that, I think, is just travel, right? I mean, there's a couple of them on there that, to me sound pretty interesting on paper. Wilkes-Barre, Toronto is one of them that sounds great, but is also probably, not terrible. It's, it's a distance thing, right? It's a kind of, I'm sure even though, you kind of cannibalize each other until, kind of like how it was last season where it was really just down to, the top 2 in the Atlantic. And you really didn't travel out of the division until the conference finals, if I'm not mistaken, which, despite how interesting the matchups would be, I suppose that's probably the big angle they'll play at there is that, it makes travel a little bit lighter, a little bit more familiar, maybe, even though they only play those teams, both teams only play each other once or twice overall in each building type of thing. Or at least, in the East, and, obviously they have some of the options to do a little bit different depending on their circumstances. But it's one of those things where, like, I think that would be really interesting, right? It'd be a really good test early on. But I think that's just one of the things that's going to, and I get like they want to have as many potential playoff games as they can for certain teams and stuff like that. And, the potential for upsets, the chaos, as it were, is pretty good too. But it's one of those things where it frustrates me because, we saw it last year where I believe, oh boy, I'm stretching my brain back to remember who got the short end of, I believe it was Providence, if I'm not mistaken, got the short end of the stick in the play-in round last season where they lost 2 games in overtime and their season was over. And that's rough, honestly, to have, I guess for them would have been 76 games kind of flushed down the toilet in 2 games, frustrates me a little bit. And, for a prospect, it's like, great, they get to play a couple of games, but it's just that it's a couple of games. The benefit of playing, even if you get swept 3 games in a 5-game series, to me is just always better than, 2 games in a 3-game series type of thing. So it always frustrates me. And that's not me saying I'm bitter at all about the Bears losing in overtime in game 3 in a close Wilkes-Barre series where they might have won in a 5-game set. So, it has nothing to do with it, of course, but it's one of those things where I get what their heart's in the right place with the format there, but when it plays out, it just doesn't play out. We just really didn't see enough upsets for me to justify it coming back. But again, I get it.
And that was the other side of it too. I think the Providence game ended on like a goalie interference or something like that. And I remember because I was covering that game, and they just the players just didn't leave the ice because they're like, this is it, right? We just played a whole season for it to come down to 3 games. I would even be willing to forego the current like home away format if it means that we don't have this craziness of buy-ins, right? Like, if we had like even like the I know we did like the 1-2 kind of thing, but if it's like a best of 7, if we have to go like the first 2 games, then 3, then 2, or something like that, I would be okay with that over like this, right? So maybe it's just a late episode hot take, but that's the way it'll work.
Yeah, and it'd be nice for it to be like, we kind of seen a lot with this divisional setup here that like, there's kind of been the 1, 2, and sometimes 3 teams in the division. Obviously, the Pacific's a great example of that. The Atlantic also kind of has a bit of separation. It'd be kind of nice where like you could kind of, have some. Obviously, I'm spitballing an alternative that obviously doesn't make a ton of sense, but it'd be nice if there's some way for the teams that are, that clinch and stay up to still play meaningful hockey. Whereas these other teams, you kind of eliminate the need for a play-in series where there's buys and all that kind of confusingness kind of mess type of thing. So it's an odd situation. But anyhow, I'll save the speculation for another episode where I can go in depth on hot takes, because we do have a really good AHL free game of the week to talk about this week. And it's some of those Pacific Division teams we were just talking about, with the Calgary Wranglers playing the Abbotsford Canucks on Saturday night, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific time. What's interesting about this matchup to me, just looking at the scheduling, it's the third game of 3 between these two teams. They'll have played one by the time this episode drops on Thursday. They play on Wednesday. And then I believe Friday, Saturday, the other 2 games. That's a best of 3 playoff series right there, pretty much, and kind of an early, midpoint, measuring stick, for lack of a better word, between these 2 teams. Abbotsford's really looking for the points. I think they're only 3 back of Calgary for second place. It would be tough for them to sweep that set of games, but it's a real measuring stick and a test, and that'd be the reward for an excellent performance in that game, certainly.
Yeah, and we also have live AHL action on the Field Pass Hockey app, and it's about between the Atlantic and the North Division this weekend when the Checkers take on the Monsters. It's a match that really just doesn't need any explaining, and we have a great tee-up on fieldpasshockey.com right now. You can check that out. That's live. Zach Delpy coming back for Charlotte. And as well, Dylan Simpson. So I think that's the 2 captains, 1 and 2 right there. So they'll be back. We'll have that, and that will be they'll be at 4 on Saturday and 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. You can download on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. We're going to switch things over now to the bonus round, and I believe Corey is going to take us away for that.
Absolutely. So somebody's going to have this bonus round next week. So this is my only chance to do one where it's Teddy trivia for the Teddy Bear Toss, where the Hershey Bears are playing on January 29th. Very excited for that game. But obviously, so for the Bears, they've been doing the Teddy Bear Toss for a long time, and it's kind of been ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. I want to see if you guys remember what season it was that the Bears took over the Teddy Bear Toss record. So they were competing with the Calgary Hitmen of the WHL for many years over this, and officially took over the lead in which season, and bonus points if you recall who scores the goal in that game. It's something we talked about on the podcast recently before, actually, too.
Do you want to do Jeopardy's Price is Right style?
Sure, that's fine too.
We'll do it that way. Unless Andrew has a precise answer.
No, I
remember something.
I can maybe guess who scored, but I don't know when it was. My guess was just going to be Matt Molson as the goal scorer, because that just seems poetic. And I'm going to say it was in 2019.
You're very close. Very, very close. Not quite, though.
I'm going to go with Chris Bourque, again, poetic. And that, I thought it was like 2012.
I was about to say, it's a good guess because Chris Bourque actually, I just learned this on Saturday. Chris Bourque did have a teddy bear toss goal in his career, but it's actually, yours is a little too far back. Andrew was a little bit too far forward. It was actually 2018 where the goal scorer was Riley Barber, who had the goal, and it was the official. I believe the Bears got just over 34,000 teddy bears to officially take the record from the Calgary Hitmen. Unfortunately, Matt Molson only had one season where he got to experience a teddy bear toss as a Bear, believe it or not, where, by the time last season's came around, he was unfortunately already on the sidelines with his back surgery. And in 2019, the goal scorer was Christian Juice in that season. That was the only one that Matt Molson got to be a part of, unfortunately, on the ice for that goal. So we'll give it to Andrew for being very close on that one, as the runner-up season for that one, certainly. But that was the year they took the record. Obviously, they topped it every year since, and we're looking to top it again on the 29th at 3 p.m. against the Bridgeport Highlanders.
I just wanted a reason to say the juice is loose.
Absolutely. I figured the Riley Barber bit would, if you got it, you got it. If you didn't, it would probably bug you, since he pretty much, if I remember right, came right over to the Grand Rapids Griffins a couple of seasons later, too.
Yep. And was a goal-scoring machine, and hey, guess what he's doing right down in Texas? Goal-scoring
what he
machine.
does.
That's why he's going to Laval, and hopefully that's why we'll have him on the pod in February. Oh, spoiler alert! Well, stay tuned for that one, because that would be a big interview. You guys would not want to miss that.
And I'll get to ask him about that too.
We're gonna have a lot of that's gonna be a long interview. I feel like between you and I, and it's gonna be right after the All-Star game. Like, there's going to be a lot of content. I think if everything goes right and we can get him on here, we might have to ask me again what my favorite episode would be, and we might have different answers, Corey and I.
I look forward to it. All this talk about Bears, I think it's time for us to go into hibernation. That is it for this week's episode of the Holy Grail. If you want to like or see more of us, you know where to find us. I mean, it's YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at The Holy Grail, GrAHL, as you may know. And we also have a load of other podcasts here on the Field Pass Hockey Network. Inside the SPHL with James Hayes. We also got Syracuse Speaks with Alexander Ackerman. And that's a Syracuse Crunch-centric podcast that focuses on maintaining a balanced perspective on an ever-shifting world of minor hockey league news. And also we have Matthew Harding and Jason Malls breaking down the ECHL's Wichita Thunder, and they chat about some of the team's legendary players. If you haven't listened to that, you got to check that out. The Rolling Thunder, a bi-weekly podcast. You can check that out. And of course, we also have lots of written work on our website, and you can see that at fieldpasshockey.com. On behalf of all of us here at the Holy Grail, I want you to have an amazing week, and we'll see you again in 7 short days.
This has been the Holy Grail Podcast. Have a question or a topic suggestion? Hit us up on Twitter or drop us an email. For the latest news across the American Hockey League and the rest of minor league hockey, download the Field Pass Hockey app, now available in the Apple and Android app stores.